So we're going to now kick off with our panel, and we have the wonderful Jacki from Dimoso who's going to come up and talk to us. This is all about supercharging your revenue and exploring alternative monetization strategies. And joining Jacki, we have Athena from Rainbow Unicorn Games, we have Rafael from Crazy Games, and Christina from READYgg Games Network. So Jacki, over to you.
Thank you. Okay. The way I run panels is a bit different to other people. If you want to just ask a question while we're talking, please just shout out. Or just hold your hand up and I'll keep an eye on everything. So, first we'll start with some introductions. So my name is Jacki Vause. I'm the CEO of a PR and marketing consultancy called Dimoso. And we've got about 6 or 7 clients here today, some of which are the sponsors. So, I ought to do a shout out for all of them, but I'll just stay to myself now. So let me just get my panel to introduce themselves. I'll start with you, Rafael.
Hi, I'm Rafael Morgan, VP of Marketing Partnerships at Crazy Games. We have one of the leading websites for web games. We work with mobile publishers, students, all type of developers, and we provide an additional revenue source for those game developers if they have success somewhere else as well.
Hi, I'm Athena Peters. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Rainbow Unicorn Games, which is a game studio that's focused on free-to-play online games to start with. I'm also a consultant for Mobile Game Doctor, and I've been making free-to-play games for 20 plus years now, so been doing a lot of monetization for a while.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Giuseppe Martoriello, the co-founder of iion. We're a game advertising platform where we try to bring all brands to advertising gaming across all environments. So in-game, around the game, and away from the game. We work with all big mobile partners across the world, and yeah, here to wear the branding hat for you on the monetization side.
And hello, I'm Christina Macedo. I'm COO and co-founder of READYgg. Essentially, READYgg is a turnkey suite of tools to bring really any game into Web3. We're optimizing current monetization strategies found in Web 2 on-chain, and we're essentially bringing new monetization that developers can tap into, powered by on-chain technology and new concepts of ownership. That essentially, I think a lot of developers will also innovate and grow based on our technology that we have available.
What a great panel, just spanning everything. So I'm really excited to get into this, so let's get cracking. I don't know if any of you were here for some of the previous panels, but one of the big thing that was talked about was the importance of LTV in Eric Kress's panel. Eric actually said monetization design is games design. So, Athena, can you talk to that? Because you really are the doyenne of monetization in games.
Yeah, no, I would say 100%. I mean, that's the thing I talk to my designers about, my clients, my students, right? Everybody. I was actually speaking to a mentee earlier today that was talking about building their game, and I said, what's your monetization plan, right? As soon as somebody tells me what their game design is, I want to know how they plan on making money off of that game, because we have to, in order to make a holistic experience for the user, we need to be thinking about both of those things from the get-go, or else they feel disjointed, right? If you think about the game design, you build it first, and then you tack monetization on top of it, it's gonna be very obvious that you just just put that on top. It wasn't part of the design to begin with. You can kind of go the other way and think, we have this monetization, what could we build that serves that monetization plan? But I think also that also can feel very like forced, right? There's plenty of games on the App Store that I could tell you were absolutely designed that way, and they don't feel like a game, right? They feel like a way to get money out of my pocket, right? And that's about it. So I always encourage folks to think about both of these things at the same time. So if you're building your team, my favorite thing to do is have a game designer and a product manager working together from the beginning, right? Have them in that room talking and designing together. so that you get this holistic experience.
That's great. I mean, for me, it's interesting watching that kind of process happen with a number of my clients, and everybody has sort of different internal structures. But a lot of it is like understanding what monetization route to go down. I mean, there are so many options, and more are coming out every day. So I think the first decisions are usually, do we look at advertising? Do we look at in-app purchases? How would you sort of advise people to sort of start thinking about different routes? I mean, there's many others as well.
I mean, for me, it's a lot about what is the game, what is the design, what is the market, right? That's key, actually, in deciding what is your style of monetization. So one of the reasons why I prefer free-to-play game design is because my goal in my career is to broaden the gaming market. I want to reach people who don't think of themselves as gamers. In order to do that, I have to take the barrier of entry away, which means that that's why I go towards free-to-play, because I like the idea that I have a chance for somebody to not be stopped by coming and checking out something new by a paywall. Instead, I want them to come in, find it's fun, and then hand me some money for it, right? But I do that because my market isn't already set for that. But for somebody who's like, their gaming market is a hardcore gamer already out the gate, right? That might not be the best monetization plan for them. For them, they're gonna wanna think of like, what is a premium model, and then a competitive, monetization followed by that, right? So it really is like, you need to think about your style of game and who your audience is, and then build your business plan around that, like you would any business, right?
So, Rafael, what do you think about the sort of that side?
Yeah, absolutely. We have a catalog of over 3,000 games. They're all free to play. We also have, within this mix, we offer everything you can expect in advertising. We also offer in-app purchase. So, but you see now, even looking at our catalogs, not every game is ready for in-app purchase. So we try to work with the ones that makes most sense, right? But sometimes, there are some premium games that also they need to be adapted to be free to play on the platform. They also have to go through a transition that sometimes is not very easy. There's definitely a lot of opportunities for explore within the web game space, different monetization strategies. I think that there is a trend right now into kind of like funneling in the users towards first giving a free experience, and then you start having microtransactions, and then you have season passes, and then subscriptions. And every game, as long as they provide this kind of constant value to the players, we see that there is a good conversion for those games. But yeah, I think free to play, what you said, providing a broad approach to the market, that's something that we value a lot. We also see that if you are young, you don't have a credit card, and so it also provide you access to your first gaming experiences as well. So not having a paywall, I mean, we enable to experience and connect with all these cool games that are coming out. And I think, yeah, it's very interesting to see. I think adding to one more layer, I was just talking to a bunch of Web3 companies as well, right? I think even there, so you can go one step further. Once the players really love your game, well, then you can sell an NFT for them. They will be proud to have it and show this around. So that's the sort of things that we're trying to build with Crazy Games, to provide the know-how that we have, looking at what was successful from one game to the other game, doing this knowledge transfer, and at the same time exploring what's new there. So yeah.
You just mentioned Web3. I'm going to go off piste here, but I'm going to bring Christina in here because Web3 monetization strategies, are they same but different?
Same but different. But I think just to bring up what was really resonating with me is the idea that the game designer or the game design team is probably your most effective weapon. And I think one of the things that we were introducing to Web3 studios or Web2 studios migrating to Web3 was the idea that the game designers is really part of your toolkit. We actually have a game design team in-house that helps essentially developers to think of new ideas, to think how, to take essentially what they're doing but bringing it on chain. Because it really just is about the user experience. We're also huge fans of free-to-play in Web3. And I think the idea here of, there's been this issue of there's not enough scale going to Web3. Well, why? Because there is usually a really big paywall. And we've known from just Web2 gaming, or just gaming in general, that a lot of people like to try, and then they kind of get hooked, or, to try to see if they like the, a new gaming genre or whatnot. So the free-to-play is really just there to invite people to your game experience to see if they like it or not, try it out. And I think that's what was missing about Web3, especially that it was a completely new area of gaming. So big fans of Web3 and huge fans of game design teams. But when it comes to monetization, as what was stated, it's really about the shift of having gaming assets as just gaming assets to having gaming assets that are now owned. And what does that open? When you yourself, your digital identity is really being created, so when you are getting a game pass, when you are getting that NFT that's really being rewarded, well, what does that mean to now your digital identity? And then how does the developer monetize that digital identity to actually incentivize what the user actually wants based on their identity? So I'll end there, but essentially that's the opening up of what Web3 technology is really allowing, is to tap into a lot of the, what we've essentially been talking about.
I'm going to pick up, we'll move on to Web3 a bit later on in the discussion, but I'm going to pick up on what you said about working with the designer. Both you and Athena have said that. Giuseppe, I know that iion helps people advertise in and outside of the game and everything else. Do you find yourself being considered with the game designers at that early on in the process? Is that something that you're seeing with the people you're working with?
Unfortunately, not as much as we would like. We usually work with the monetization managers, and that's kind of already when the game has been published. So we'd love to be involved a bit earlier, and I think I fully agree with my colleagues here that it needs to be, monetization needs to be brought in at the game design level.
And the game design level, there's so much to consider as well, because we were talking about ad formats and the different types of ad formats that you can include. I mean, everybody's, like we saw a brilliant presentation on India just now, talking about banners and everything else, but there's so many more types of ad formats. Could you just speak a little bit about how those could be brought into that whole process?
Sure, yeah. We like to categorize them as the IAB does. So there is the in-game formats, which is the billboard inside the game, so the in-game display. Lots of attention from brands on that one because it's less intrusive than the standard banners. In-game audio is a really growing market. So personally, one of my favorite formats in gaming. Around the game is like the bread and butter, so your banners, interstitials, rewarded. What we see from the agency and the brands is that mostly rewarded is really the hot one out there, because has the high V3 rate that the reward actually incentivized to go with. So rewarded video definitely the hottest one. We're also active on the what we call away from the game, so when the user is not actually playing the game, but like browsing websites that talk about gaming or influencers. And those are really good door openers for brands. And then they go back a lot to buy the bread and butter. So we see a lot of them that, I'm really interested about your in-game display or your in-game video, and then they buy also the around the game side. So we're like a full funnel for them.
So if I may add, so on the platform level, we see exactly that, especially with rewarded video, right? We bring the user to the game, and we see that some games, when they bring a good game design with rewarded, well planned, they can monetize the same user 10 times better, right? So imagine you have the opportunity to do 10 times better if you actually think about how you're doing this stuff. And as we see this, and it's a very interesting point.
We talk about rewards. I mean, are the rewards incentivizing enough? Is this something that you're seeing as a...
They can always incentivize more, so a better reward is always better because it helps with that view-through rate, so that completion rate. So yeah, I think it's quite important for the game to have good enough incentives, and you can make them also real rewards. I've seen so. Definitely the rewarded side is the hot one for us.
But just also to add, I think it's also sometimes the remedy can become a poison if it gets too much, even the rewarded videos. We see this as well. So if there's too heavy, if not thought through, then it doesn't convert at all, right? Because the people get overwhelmed about it. So you really have to think careful, A/B test the stuff, and look at what are the right rewards you have to do at what point you have to do it, and then then the user will watch it gladly, right? I know because I play as well at crazy games, and sometimes I really want to have the reward, and you go through and watch that video,
Yeah, it seems to be all about the balance, making sure that balance is. How do you monitor? How do you create that balance? Is there anybody that wants to kind of speak about that?
Test it a lot. Like A/B testing is your friend. If you're not A/B testing, please just leave this meet right now. Go start. Like I don't know why you're not already. That's, and that's like every little thing, right? So if you're thinking about putting rewarded ads in your game, like think about where you're putting them. What are the rewards? Test out one reward with a segment of your audience and test out a different reward with a segment of your audience. Collect your data for a couple of weeks, go back and say which one of these did better, and then roll that change out. But like you should be constantly testing each one of those changes and then reviewing that data and then making the best decision based on what the data is feeding back to you. That's really the only way you can find those balance. It's the same thing we've been doing in game design for years, right? Like you can come up with a system, but like you don't know if a game is balanced until you actually start putting it out there and getting the feedback from the users and having them run the paces. You want to do the same thing with any kind of like ad creation, monetization creation, like the same thing, right? Like even just your IAPs, you're wanting to test your different pricing, see how it's affecting your economy when you give out certain amounts of like currency versus others, right? Like all of those things are things you're not going to see until they're in the hands of the user. So do like little changes at a time, try to only change one thing at a time so that your test is clean, right? And then just be constantly iterating.
I have a point, but there's somebody with a question, so maybe they can go first.
So I just wanted to check in on because A/B testing is something we all want to do and should do. A lot of teams don't know A, how to do it, and B, don't have the budget to do it. So one of the things I've been trying to get people to do is to spend like hyper casual style, like $150 maximum for 3 days, do one thing, and then make the changes, do the next thing, and see what the rate of change is. Are those the kind of strategy you recommend to people who don't have the experience in doing that kind of research, or do you have any other kind of advice for people who just don't have the budget?
Yeah, you can do that. You can also try, splitting your builds. There's also just a lot of tools that are available, like depending on what engine you're using. Even Unity has built-in A/B testing tools. Like there are just so many.
They do, but to get an audience for that, you've got to have got some level of spend. And
right, to get the audience into the space.
To get to the point where they
jump
can
in.
justify the spend.
Yeah.
So one of the things that essentially I think for me as a Web3 builder is really the idea that Web3 optimizes the community. And we actually have built community A/B testing, or what we like to call is just, community beta test. And the idea here is that developers are now free to launch various campaigns to the player or beta tester community, READYgg beta tester community, all validated through their digital identities, and essentially can run campaigns free of charge. And the idea here is that you're giving a community that wants to test the games, that wants to find the bugs, that wants to give feedback, an opportunity to do it. So for the developer, especially the indie developer, it's actually a free opportunity to get feedback. And for the community, they're doing something they want to do. And then us as an ecosystem of READYgg, we actually reward based on our own on-chain token, essentially giving back the tokenized economy back to the beta tester. But the idea here too is growing the community side of beta testing, and how does that come and help, especially indie developers that don't necessarily have the resources.
And again, that's great because you're tapping into an existing community. It's difficult for people who are starting from ground zero.
Correct, and we actually have 75,000 validated beta testers that have had to do testing, that essentially have had to validate their identity, and have to prove that they're able to actually do it. So it's a very interesting sort of relationship between, again, bringing the developer closer to the player, and that's definitely what we really want to bring, like what we're really enabling.
just making a shameless plug here. Well, we have 30 million monthly active users, so if you want to test your game, test something, we can bring scale, and we can also do soft launch, so we can kind of like put a little bit drop by drop, so you get to see this thing happening.
Just wanted to add something about the testing since we're on that topic. So also if you look at the ad formats, like for instance in-game, in-game display, in-game audio, they need a lot more time than testing like a rewarded or a banner. So we work with a lot of partners like Dimoso, Adverti, AudioMob, and these guys are onto something really important. So we also need to give them enough time so that they can sell your game to the agency and so on. So I think it's also important to give time for those tests. I think it's quite an important one.
That's a really valid point, because as we're seeing more the evolution of the industry turning much more into, from just playing games, but to being immersive and being completely consumed by games, we're getting audio, we're getting video, we're getting completely into it. There's still a lot more time than just shoving up a banner and seeing what color works. It's a completely different set, isn't it, of variables that you're looking at. So, can I just ask the question, and because this is very interesting to me, because I'm advising an indie developer right now who is in the big indie pitch in London for Steel Media. She actually won a prize. And, one of the big sort of issues for her, she's creating a cozy game. And cozy games don't naturally lend themselves to monetization because it's just not in the thing. So, we talked about subscription. Do we have anybody who wants to talk a little bit about that as a consideration as a monetization strategy? Athena, you're nodding away. Is that something that you've dealt with in the past?
Yeah, so like I said, I've been doing free to play for like almost 20 years now, because I started when we went free to play with MMOs, right? And so we were subscription, right? And then it was like, well, let's try free to play. And then we went back to subscription through free to play, right? And then now I'm seeing it happen in mobile spaces now with Season Pass. It's a little different than subscriptions because they don't like auto renew, right, on your mobile phones anyway. But it's a very similar thing, right? And I kind of raised my hand that like cozy games don't monetize. This is one of the things that I learned when I was executive producer on Lord of the Rings Online, was that like when we really started looking into our free-to-play monetization, we had to dig into what it was that was getting our players excited. And the leadership before me had thought, well, we just keep releasing updates and we're selling like update packs, basically, or DLCs or whatever, and that's the key thing to focus on, the next giant zone and all these quests and all of this stuff. But what the players were asking for were more outfits to wear to the parties that they would organize on the weekends, and also some more instruments or fix the music system because the band that I put together on the weekend is having bugs, right? But those were being ignored because it was like, oh, well, it's just an outfit, it's not a giant quest zone. Well, the thing is that we can spin an outfit out in 24 hours. Right, a zone's going to take us another 6 months or something, and lots of team and staff and everything. And so those things got ignored. But the truth is, like, those little things get people very excited. Yeah. And so you can set up like things like season passes. I love to see in some of the dress-up games that I'm a big fan of, where it's like, here's some outfits. They're going to just be out for the next 2 months. And plus some other stuff for my crafting and all of that. But I'll jump on it because it's just like, oh yeah, I'm gonna get this cool thing, and then I'm gonna know that I'm the only one because I happened to jump in during this time. Yeah. So like finding things like that where people feel like it also adds to your engagement, because if I've gone ahead and made that investment, now I'm gonna come back in the next couple of months multiple times because I want to get use out of the money I just spent. So like, yeah, please don't abandon subscriptions. They're great.
I can only validate that how often my kids ask me to buy a Fortnite clothes because that's so cool. So every week. So it works.
So Giuseppe, just moving on from the point that you're making about listening to your players and everything else, what kind of KPIs should developers be setting for themselves in terms of their
Well, what we see that they always ask us for is CPMs and fill rates.
Yeah.
These are always the key ones. But we think we also need to think beyond those. Because, you know, if you look at, for instance, the brand type of advertising, they typically are not going to pay the same CPM that AdMob pays, right? So they're not going to give you $100 for a rewarded. They're going to pay a little bit less, but, you know, the ad quality is going to be much higher, and they're not going to take away your users away. So you need to balance those things, and user retention is as important as having a high CPMs. Well, of course, when you talk to a monetization manager, their short-term goals is like to increase those CPMs. So there is always that balance that you need to have.
Yeah, do you think the monetization manager is less incentivized by LTV than...
Yeah, in a way. Yeah,
it kind of is counterintuitive though, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, it's the LTV that's going to outweigh everything else, so...
We see with certain publishers, they split it differently, so they don't split out monetization and user acquisition. They have one person to look after both, and then they just specialize in certain games, and we see that works quite well. I mean, it has its pros and cons. So one way is that you have a very specialized team on monetization and one on user acquisition, and others that have, let's say, the same in one person, yeah.
Yeah, but that's something that's really fascinating to me, is how people give those roles within the developer organization. I mean, an indie developer, it's going to be, I mean, you're 1 minute you're mopping the floor, and the next minute you're deciding on UA, and the next minute you're deciding on... So do you advocate keeping those roles as tight as can be, or do you see an advantage in splitting them out?
Tough one. Yeah, I think there are pros and cons in both models. The pros of having, you know, more specialized people in monetization is that they become really good at it. But the drawback is that they might not see the other side. Having them at once, it's it helps you to see, okay, how much I'm getting from monetization and how much I can spend in user acquisition. So that usually works quite well, what we're seeing. So I would go with that, but it depends really on the organization.
So the organization, let's move over to Web3, Christina, because I mean, I'm a big fan of Web3. I know some people are not. In one of the panels I heard, why did the metaverse not work? And it was Web3 and NFT. But you know, that to me is it's new technology, it's new way of doing things. And one of the great things about the new way of doing things within Web3 is this community involvement, and the community almost, they see it as a benefit to themselves, as to make a game better through the testing. Could you tell us a little bit more about why an indie developer should consider Web3 for developing for Web3, and how monetization is slightly different in that?
Definitely, and I think I'll also add just on the, you know, people want assets, and they want also to bring those assets to, again, their digital identity or on-chain identity, we like to say. So when we essentially, I think as product builders, we always ask, who are we building for? Well, right now we're actually building for Generation A. The Generation A want to collect, want to create, and want community. And that is exactly what Web3 is. So when we talk to developers, we really ask them, well, let's talk about your gaming business in Web3, right? Let's talk about it really as the gaming business. And who are you actually building for? So even us at READYgg, in the way that we're building our ecosystem as well to support all these developers, one of the shifts that we saw is how do we get more people to find out more of the games that are building using our tech? And it wasn't just the typical launcher or app stores, it was through the marketplace. And why? Because a lot of people actually shop for which game they want to download by what asset they want to buy. So we're flipping it now, right? Now the marketplace
give an example of the asset.
Becomes the launcher.
Give an example of what the asset would be.
Exactly. So it could be a pair of pants that just look amazing, and you want to know where those pants, you know, for which avatar. Where does that avatar? It's in which the game. So when you actually click on our marketplace to purchase the pair of pants, you're actually prompted to go download the game as well. So it really becomes interesting in how we're flipping it now, in that the aspect of collections becomes a way to actually download your game. And then I'll flip it the other way, is the marketplace. So One of the, I think, really interesting parts of monetization in Web3 is telling the developer that their game is this piece of real estate that lives on the blockchain. Now, this piece of real estate is what you can actually monetize. We want UGC, for example, user-generated content, to really be part of the conversation. So what we, one of the recommendations we make to certain games is what we would suggest you to do is with this new generation, they're gonna want a lot of content. Creating a lot of content is incredibly expensive. But there's another interesting point. They also want community. So why not look at your gaming real estate, your game that you essentially are creating, and look at it as the opportunity to actually open up e-commerce opportunities. Bring in your marketplace. Now, what's different from an app store to a marketplace is a marketplace also is not only the place where you sell what you create, but it's an opportunity for your players to sell what they own, sell what they create, and also trade or rent out what they have. It becomes a really interesting way to add more engagement. So we tell developers, put in a marketplace, take your best assets, sell the 2D and 3D templates of those assets to your players. Those players that buy the assets are now player creators. Have them create new collections based on the assets themselves. Make them have fun. Make them mint those collections and they now own those collections. Make them sell those collections into the marketplace. And now you as a developer take a revenue share off of everything being sold because you're offering that space to the player. Now this relationship between the player and the developer, or player creator and developer, is heightened because the game becomes also the place of community where these assets are shared. And if you, for example, are part of a group in the game, if you want to follow a player creator, or if you just want to buy assets created by other people who love the same game as you, that becomes an opportunity. So now the game shifts from just a game to a game that is now elevated, allowing the player community to come in and be part of the economics of the game, and it just grows the community at all for everybody really involved in, making this game succeed, essentially.
Wow. That
to me is Web3 gaming.
Yeah, that to me sounds like a utopia. That's a great thing for Web3. What about in Web 2 or in the hybrid side of things? I mean, talk to me a little bit, Rafael, about how you see community working.
I have different views about Web3, I think it's beautiful if you can get there, right? But to get there, you need to have a really good game, right? So I'm keen to imagine like that people would actually only NFTs or Web3 comes actually after in-app purchase only. It's just one more step of the funnel versus it being its own thing, right? And that's how I see it. That's how we see it at Crazy Games as well. So, but ultimately, it starts on having a great game. You need to have a great game, and if you have a great game, then you can monetize that game. It's good if you think earlier about it, right? But then you build your community, and then your community is more interested about the game. They talk about each other. There's word of mouth, and then they care about like having ownership inside the game. But I think to get this, it takes a lot, right? Like it takes really a lot, right? But some games will do that. Some games, you have this massive million followers that they go and they absolutely would queue up and wait 10 hours to play 10 minutes of the newest release during games conferences, right? Like those games could do this. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, we're seeing indicators. I mean, we talked earlier on today about UGC becoming a big thing in Fortnite, for example. So the indicators in all of the whole of the market, not just Web3. And moving that on a bit, just looking at what the big guys are doing, what Google's doing, what Meta's doing. Let's look at Google's announcement just recently that they're beta testing intrinsic advertising.
Big one.
But it's a big indicator of where they think the market is going. So Giuseppe, just talk to me a little bit about what your reaction to that.
Yeah, very big announcement. We're quite excited in a way that we think that it will make the pie bigger. Now, of course, it's Google, so they're going to take a big share of that pie. But it also means that it will become more mainstream. Because, let's be honest, so far, in-game is still at the early stage. And now with Google entering, we could hit that mainstream. So I think it's going to be quite a big one for the gaming industry. Hopefully in positive ways. It means more people attracted to that.
I mean, sometimes I think there are so many different options available that it's just an overall awareness of what you can put in your game.
I will add and something just because I think one of the speakers before was actually talking about offer walls. And I think offer walls is going to really be something a lot of players are going to be looking for. And I think that, again, coming from Web3, that's one of the main marketing opportunities for a developer is through offer walls. Literally, you can say you want a player that plays, farm type of game for 16 minutes every third day. And then the player can literally click with their digital identity on the offer, and the offer will validate essentially the identity, and then they'll move on to whatever is being incentivized. But the idea now of the offer wall is definitely something that we're exploring, and I think it's very interesting to think about, on the marketing side of that.
What do you think of offer walls?
Well, everything has to offer value, right? Like we think about how you invest your time. So if it's something that's valuable for the player, put it on the right place. Why not? It can work. But yeah, I think there is to get there. You need a lot of thought as well about how you would like to do that.
Okay, I'm looking at time. I've tried to cover as many things as I can do. Have we got any questions? No. Well,
clearly
over to you, Oscar.
Well, yeah. I'll sneak on up. I think the whole area of monetization, particularly looking at the differences between the Web3 and the sort of non-blockchain models, I think is really crucial. And one of the things that strikes me, and that we spend a lot of time when we're consulting on games and designing even cozy games, we happen to be having a cozy game published on console. And we're applying similar principles to our design strategy for monetization for that game, regardless of the platform. Because, in my opinion, it's about user journey. So from the stuff that you guys are doing, how do you think about the user journey, the user flow from the onboarding through to the foreshadowing of why they should keep playing to then the conversion? Do you look at it in that sort of, what was the phrase that Eric taught? Transactional velocity. Do you look at that kind of stuff?
Yeah, of course. I mean, we try. That's the beauty about the web, right? Like you can have the most frictionless process to get somebody into a game. It's as simple as one click, and it cannot get easier than that, right? We see right now there's different companies looking at this as well. So LinkedIn announced that they're gonna do games. Discord announced that they're gonna do the games. So everybody's looking at web games as well because of this as well, right? And they keep the user engaged as well, and they just move them as fast as they can through the funnel, right? So, but yeah, so for us, it's a key thing we're looking at. We slice the user into certain touch points that we think are important, and we optimize every single part of the journey. Then we can talk about like sending push notifications, emails, retargeting the user, and reactivating, sending offers. So there's a lot. It's a lot of consideration to put it at. But yeah, making it as easy as possible for somebody to play your game and have a good time, have the wow moments, the earliest that they get hooked. That's the secret.
Yeah, I was gonna say I do a lot of thinking about as we're designing games, thinking about the monetization. I often think about like the pain and the similar to the way if I were gonna launch a standalone game, like just a console title, right? We always talk about how many hours of gameplay are in this thing. So like there's lots of formulas where you can say like this many gameplay hours for this price point, right? And so when I'm thinking about game designs in those smaller bits, I'm thinking about, how far is comfortable for my player to be like, go on this journey and then get enough excitement that they want to take that next bite, right? So it's similar to like when you're designing a TV show on a streaming service. What is that pacing? What is that timing that makes somebody say, yep, I've had a good enough bite but now I'm tempted enough to go the next stage.
Hungry, I want more.
I'm hungry, right? Like, oh my gosh, you ended this episode on a cliffhanger. I should go to bed, but I'm not going to, right? I want them to have that moment and then say, okay, fine, here's $5 to give me more, right? And then they're excited to give me that $5 versus being like, oh, I guess I have to do this because otherwise I won't be able to compete, right? And so
Let's
that's what I'm always
stop
thinking
taxing
about.
players and get them to buy things they want.
Yeah, you just gotta, it's pacing, right? It's really feeling and testing out that pacing.
There is also the other side of it, right? Which I see myself more and more. Like sometimes I bought like Red Dead Redemption, the last one, and I played for like 10 hours and I finished the game not even 1%. And I said like, I would never buy a game like this again.
I mean, on my perspective, the player journey, it's all about the player journey. I mean, for us, it's still a very novel space that even the KPI, what we are really, really looking at most of the time is actually retention. We just want to make sure if retention, because if there is someone to retain, we've made it through the first hurdle of getting through some of the technologies that they haven't necessarily ever seen before. Something else that's important for us is the concept of reputational capital. And that's so important for us because, again, connected to retention is time spent in games, enjoying the game. Are you actually really having a good time? And I think that's also a shift that we're seeing from KPIs that are more seen on the Web3 side of things for now instead of the Web2. So reputational capital, part of the player journey, how does that all fit together is really important.
And at the end of the day, if we don't have that, we don't get the ratings. If we don't have the ratings, we don't get people downloading, and therefore we don't get people in the first place. On that note, I'm going to have to say thank you very much. I could literally talk about this for another few hours. Thank you very much, audience, for indulging me in my asking a question.